Business Academy. It's Dr. Erin, your high performance business coach and the success psychologist. And welcome to Module 3. It's the third and last module, which is a 4-part video series talking all about the psychology of selling and the psychology of influence and the psychology of leadership. Now, we understand the psychology of being a high performance from previous trainings in terms of high performance productivity and high performance mindset. And really what makes high performers different is the way they think about things. And last but not least, if you want to be a high performer, you're going to need high performing levels of influence. So let's talk about, how does one gain influence? How does one become an influencer? How does one become a leader? What does that even mean? So I like to always back up and look at what the experts in my field say about a thing. And rather than reinventing the wheel, I go to the experts. I go to the most advanced training I can get on a subject. And by far, of course, John Maxwell is, I would say, and many would agree, the world's premier leadership coach. He's trained more leaders in the world than any other person. And he has many, many books on leadership. But I want to give you his definition of leadership and then talk about how influence and self-discipline are really, really correlated with the level of leadership that you will have in your life. So let me read a little bit from his book. Again, this book, Developing the Leader Within You by John Maxwell. So he says, leadership. Everyone talks about it, few understand it. Most people want it, few achieve it. There are over 50 definitions and descriptions of it in my personal files. What is this intriguing subject we call leadership? Ask 10 people to define leadership and you'll probably receive 10 different answers. After more than 5 decades of observing leadership potential within my family and years of developing my own leadership, I have come to this conclusion. Leadership is influence. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. My favorite leadership proverb is, he who thinketh he leadeth and hath no one following him is only taking a walk. So then he goes on to say, leadership really is the ability to obtain followers. Now, if we look at the definition of influence, that's what the definition is. It's the ability to have people follow you on your mission or enroll them into your purpose or enroll them into what you think is important. And when you're in business, that's exactly what you need to become really skilled at, is how to enroll people into a shared mission with you. So I thought I'd do this video by this picture. This picture means so much to me because this was taken at my very first one-day live event, which was 1 year ago. So it was in the fall of 2018, where I had this big dream to hold my own events. I didn't have a clue how to do it, and I got busy figuring it out. And I like to say I'm good at getting good at things. So I want you to get good at getting good at things. And one of my visions for my events would be that they would be so life-changing and so transformative that people would come to them and they would exclaim things like, I am unstoppable and I am good enough and my goals are achievable, and believe in themselves, and that they might even raise their hands doing that kind of thing at my event. And I made them, so there they are doing it. But I wasn't able to host a one-day live event where 73 people came without having influence. And I will tell you that in the last 2 years of growing my business, I could count on one hand the people that I knew before I built my business. So everyone in my life is new to my life within the last 2 years. So I've done a lot of connecting with many, many humans to gain this level of influence, and it's possible for you as well. So John Maxwell also says, if leadership is the ability to have influence, influence only comes through connection. So this picture always reminds me that, we truly are better together. And if you want to go fast, go with others. If you want to go slow, go alone. That was never something I wanted to do. I never wanted to go alone. I want to help many, 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 many people. But I had to learn how to connect with people in a way that was meaningful, in a way that showed people I valued them. And if you know anything about my story, I went on 213 coffee dates in my first year of business. Now, I didn't set out to go on coffee dates to earn an award of Saleswoman of the Year. I didn't set out with this strategy of, I believe that coffee dates are the way to grow a business. I actually went out on coffee dates with people because that was how I knew how to connect with people. And I know that when I connect with people, I'm happier. I'm going to be able to create something in my business with more ease, more fun, quicker, right? So I looked back because I had thought, wow, it seems like I've gone on a lot of these coffee dates. And I counted them, and it was 213 coffee dates. And I know that that's not necessarily a duplicatable model for everybody, but what is duplicatable is the concept behind it. And the concept that was so successful and will be for you as well is how I showed up in the coffee dates. So one of the things that people who have influence and people who are leaders, one of the things they have is this overarching feeling about them that they are more interested in you than they are in being interesting. So they're, really focused on being interested rather than being interesting. And what that looks like is leaders ask great questions. Leaders listen really attentively, and with intention. They're not sitting back thinking of what the next thing is that they're going to say, okay? So one of the things that I want you to pull away from this model is, how can you add value to people? How can you listen to people? How can you ask people, what are you up to in the world? What makes you super lit up? What makes you feel like, you're just unstoppable? What is it? Do you have a mission in your life that you're just super, super passionate about? What are your obstacles in reaching that mission? When you ask those kind of questions, what do you care about? And then you ask, how can I help you? How can I partner with you on that mission? Like, what do you need from me? Amazing things happen. And you start partnering and connecting with people in a meaningful way. And psychologically, we know that when people connect and help us, they like us more, and vice versa. When we help people, we like them more. So if you want to be a high performer, you're going to need dozens of people who will champion you, and you're going to need to champion dozens of people. Okay. So the other thing we know about effective leaders is they have what is called integrity. So let me describe to you what Socrates says. Socrates reminds us, again, this is from John Maxwell's book, the first key to greatness is to be in reality what we appear to be. Too often we try to be a human doing before we have become a human being. To earn trust, a leader has to be authentic. For that to happen, one must come across as a good musical composition does. The words and the music must match. Let me give you one last definition of being in integrity and why it's so important. Actually, one more statistic here. The book says, according to 1,300 senior executives who responded to a survey, integrity is the human quality most necessary to business success. 71% put it at the top of a list of 16 traits responsible for enhancing one's effectiveness. So what is integrity? The definition of integrity is you're complete, you're whole. There are no pieces to you that are out of alignment. You are who you say you are. When you appear on Facebook Lives or social media and then people meet you in real life, there's not a disconnect. It's, wow, she's exactly who I thought she was. People say this all the time when they meet Oprah Winfrey. If you've listened to any interviews or people that share going to her show, they will say, she's exactly like she appears on TV. And I say to myself, of course she is. Of course she is. If you look at, excuse me, that level of success, that level of authenticity, there is no room for disconnect. One has to be totally in congruence. Now, this does not mean you have to be perfect. It means you're striving to be your best, most authentic, ideal self. So one of the exercises that you want to think about to be a really integral leader is, who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What kind of business owner do you want to be? What kind of wife or husband do you value being? What kind of parent do you value being? What kind of friend do you value being? Think about all the different roles that you have in your life. How do you want to show up in those roles? Leaders really think about and have a lot of intention behind how they want to show up in the world. Okay. One of the things you can do is you can write down your 3 words that best describe your ideal self. And these are my 3 words: fit, free, and aligned. And I have these on my phone to remind me every day that these are my words. I place them back here in my office so that I can look at them. And I'm learning to give myself intentional cues, and I recommend you do this too, throughout the day, in every transition that I'm in my life, to remind myself of my words. I am fit, free, and aligned. I am fit, free, and aligned. I am fit, free, and aligned. How would, ideal self Erin deal with this situation? What would she say? What would she do? What would she buy? What would she say no to? What would she eat? How would she interact in this coffee date? So leaders, effective leaders, are very intentional of who they're being, not just what they're doing, who they're being. The last thing that I want to share with you is the price tag of being a leader, okay? And this is what I mean by it. There is a price for being successful and a price for being a leader that has positive, impactful influence on others. And the price tag is self-discipline. I'll say it again. The price tag is self-discipline. And John Maxwell talks about this in a chapter that is called The Price Tag of Leadership, Self-Discipline. So with all great leaders, he says, research shows that self-discipline came first, okay? So I want to share with you some new psychological research about how exciting how exciting the research is to show us that the brain actually partners with us to be a machine that can help us be more disciplined, okay? And it's actually in our neurotransmitters that is where the solution is. So let me tee this up. So I would like to suggest that there is freedom in discipline, okay? And that freedom is achieved by removing choices that are counterproductive to your goals. And by the removal of those, one is free from kind of self-destructive behaviors, and one is free to more readily and easily select healthy, successful choices. Okay, so let me explain where most of us kind of get this wrong. So the word discipline often is associated with things like restriction and restraint, the denial of pleasure, suppression of our desires, or sometimes people even think it's this character trait that you're either born with or you're not, and you just got lucky or you didn't. And a more modern, scientifically backed definition suggests that discipline is actually a learned set of behaviors that is available to everybody who's willing to engage in acts that are in congruence with a stated goal or a feeling state. I'll say that again. Discipline is available to anyone who's willing to engage in behaviors that are in congruence with either your goals or your feeling states, which are your values. So if I'm behaving in line with, and I'm being in congruence with a woman who is fit, free, and aligned, right? I'm going to, by definition, have self-discipline. And here's the greatest research. Just came out this last year, and it won the Nobel Prize and the Brain Prize. And this is what we know, that when you behave in line with your stated values, the dopamine neurotransmitter in your brain gets released. And dopamine is what helps us feel good, and it also creates what's called biological desire. In other terms, it's called behavioral momentum. So what that means is it creates this desire in you to want to repeat that experience, thereby increasing more success, more sense of accomplishment, and more happiness. So because of that, the more disciplined actions we take and the more frequently we take them, the happier the person becomes, the freer we become as a result of this dopamine effect. Isn't that amazing? So your brain is actually going to work with you and for you to produce this neurotransmitter called dopamine that's going to help it make it easier for your brain to choose the behaviors that are self-disciplined. It's so exciting. So it really is cutting edge research that shows us if we want to close the gap that is called the knowing doing gap. The knowing doing gap is that gap between we know what to do, why don't we do what we know? I'll say that again. The knowing doing gap is that gap between we know what to do, why don't we do what we know? So what we know about this now is self-discipline is the way to bridge that gap, and self-discipline is caused and perpetuated with neurotransmitters in our brain that are going to help us be more disciplined. So we talked about leadership and servant leadership. As you can see by the title now, leadership is in direct proportion to one's level of influence, and one's level of influence is a direct result of one's level of connection with others. And you cannot connect with others if you do not want to understand others, if you do not take interest in others, if you don't ask, how can I add value to others? Okay. And then the price tag of leadership is self-discipline. And we've talked about this in terms of high performance productivity, but a little bit every day goes a long way. And now you can see the science that we've discovered that backs it up. A little bit of a self-disciplined behavior creates more momentum, makes the brain want to achieve that again, makes you feel good about yourself, gives you a shot of dopamine, which is that feel-good neurotransmitter. And you are now in this positive feedback loop of closing the knowing doing gap. So the next couple videos, we're going to talk about sales, we're going to talk more about influence, and we're going to wrap it up with how to take inspired actions to be the high performer that you desire to be. So we will see you on the next video. Bye-bye.